When the living embodiment of raw power and island cool sits face to face with one of television's most unfiltered hosts, sparks are inevitable, but no one in the studio expected an inferno. What began as a routine interview quickly became a brutal test of patience, wit, and dignity as Jason Momoa found himself under relentless fire from Joy Behar. And the Hollywood Titan showed why you never poke the bear, or in this case the shark, too many times. The View studio was alive with an electric hum as audience members settled into their seats. Every chair was taken and every phone was poised to record. This morning was special. Jason Momoa, the babe whose physical presence alone commanded reverence, was in the building. At 45, he walked onto the stage as though he owned it. Not with arrogance, but with a loose, powerful confidence, born of a lifetime playing warriors, kings, and outlaws alike. Dressed in a dusty pink vest that showed off his tattoos and signature jewelry, he nodded once to the audience, flashing a Shaka sign. His intense, golden gaze met with thunderous applause. Across from him sat Joy Behar, wearing her signature glasses and an expression already sharpened for battle. To the audience, it might have seemed like just another spirited episode, but to those who knew Joy's ways, that glint in her eye meant she was not here to celebrate Jason. She was here to confront him. "Jason Momoa," Joy began, her voice already dripping with something between sarcasm and defiance. "Welcome to The View. It's not every day we have a savage warlord grace our little table." Jason offered her a small, relaxed smirk. "Well, Joy, I figured it was time to swim into the shark tank," he said in that deep, rumbling bass, the audience chuckling warmly. But Joy didn't chuckle. Instead, she leaned forward, fingers steepled, and fired the first real shot. "You've made a career out of playing brutes and barbarians who solve their problems with fists and swords. Don't you think it's time to put a shirt on and let the next generation take over? Maybe Hollywood's had enough of your type." Jason's smile barely flickered, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "My type? You mean someone who honors his heritage, tells epic stories, and tries to bring a little fun to the world? Well, Joy, it seems the audience disagrees with you." A few audience members even clapped at that, but Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You've been coasting on the same abs and I'm long hair since Baywatch. Don't you think it's getting tired?" Jason tilted his head as if sizing up an opponent in the ring. His reply was calm but cutting. "Funny thing about images that last 20 years, Joy. They're called iconic. Maybe that's why people still show up." Joy rolled her eyes theatrically, but the audience reaction and another small cheer clearly irritated her. She pressed on. "All right, Jason," she continued, flipping through her cards. "You starred in Aquaman, which some critics, including me, said was just a loud underwater video game. Really? Don't you think it was just another one of your testosterone-fueled vanity projects?" Jason's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back, folding his massive arms. "You know, Joy," he said evenly, "that little vanity project made over $1 billion and brought joy to kids all over the planet. Not bad for a glorified lifeguard, huh?" Laughter and applause erupted around the studio, but Joy was undeterred. She was hunting now, and the scent of conflict was too sweet for her to back off. "You see," she said, her voice rising above the crowd noise, "that's what I'm talking about. Hollywood gives franchises to men like you for playing the same tough guy over and over again. Where's the depth? Where's the intellect? Do you even care about what the thinking generation wants to see?" Jason sat perfectly still, letting her words hang in the air like the humidity before a tropical storm. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. "You're confusing entertainment with emptiness," he said. "Trends come and go. Good energy stays. Maybe you'd understand that if you spent less time judging and more time feeling." The audience gasped audibly at that, and even a few of Joy's co-hosts exchanged wary glances. But Joy, she leaned back, a bitter smile curling her lips. "Oh, so now you're telling me to feel from a man who's been glorifying violence and aggression his whole career? To a man whose characters teach boys to solve everything with a trident or a blade?" Jason's gaze hardened, though his composure never wavered. He sat forward just slightly, fixing her with that intense stare that had intimidated countless villains before her. "My films," he replied coolly, "teach that strength is about protection, and that there are consequences when you ignore the natural order. Maybe you'd know that if you'd actually watch them instead of just reading the tabloids." The audience roared at that, and for the first time, Joy faltered, but only for a heartbeat. "Oh, I've seen enough," she shot back, voice sharp as broken glass. "Enough to know that you're just another symbol of toxic masculinity from a time when men thought physical dominance was everything. This isn't the Stone Age anymore, Jason." For the first time all morning, Jason smiled. Not warm, not mocking, but something much wilder. The kind of smile a predator gives right before it strikes. "Maybe," he said, "but it seems I'm still standing, and you're still trying to figure out why." The studio exploded in applause and gasps as Joy flushed bright red, her eyes narrowing to slits. Jason leaned back, calm as ever, while Joy fumbled for her next attack. The producers in the control room exchanged frantic looks, wondering if they should cut to commercial already. But they didn't, because everyone in the room knew this was just the beginning. The studio air had grown thick. You could almost hear hearts pounding under the applause, under the silence. Joy Behar was rattled, but not beaten. Not yet. What started as a battle of words was turning into a full-blown spectacle as Joy doubled down on her insults, trying everything she could to crack Jason Momoa's legendary chill. As the applause from Jason's last line faded, the studio settled into an uneasy quiet. Joy Behar sat stiffly in her chair, shuffling her cue cards, her lips pressed into a thin line. Even the producers behind the glass looked tense, hands hovering over buttons to cut to commercial if this confrontation went completely off the rails. But Joy didn't retreat. "Oh no!" She leaned forward again, her eyes gleaming with a kind of reckless determination. "Well," she said with a sharp edge, "you seem awfully confident for someone whose entire fame is built on looks. I mean, really, Jason, do you ever get tired of playing the same old rugged, shirtless, grunting, emotionally stunted man in every movie? Or is that just who you are?" Jason tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady and cool as deep water. "You call them looks," he said. "I call it a presence people connect with. You can dress it up in fancy insults, Joy, but mana and spirit don't go out of style." Joy let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You think mana and spirit are all it takes? That's the problem with you action stars. You think you're deeper than you really are. You think scowling at a green screen makes you an artist?" Jason's lip twitched, but not quite into a smile. "Maybe it doesn't," he allowed, "but it seems to bother you an awful lot for someone who claims not to care." That earned another ripple of laughter from the audience, the kind Joy could no longer ignore. "All right, fine," she snapped, flipping to another card. "Let's talk about Game of Thrones, a show where you played a warlord who, spoiler alert, treated women like property. And you, the big fan favorite, launched your career on that savagery. Tell me, Jason, how is that empowering? How is that not just another barbaric tale of a man who takes what he wants?" Jason's eyes narrowed slightly, his voice dropping lower. "It's not about just taking," he said. "It's about a fictional world, about harsh realities, and about playing a character who actually learns to love and respect his queen, even in a brutal world." His words hit like a hammer. The audience quieted, some visibly moved, but Joy pressed on, her tone rising, her frustration boiling over. "Oh, come on," she barked. "That's just more macho posturing, wrapped up in fake nuance. You've spent your entire career pretending to be deep while cashing checks from the same old violence machine. Don't pretend otherwise." Jason's gaze hardened. He leaned forward slightly, just enough to command the space between them. "Pretend," he repeated, voice like rolling thunder. "Joy, you've been pretending this entire time. Pretending this is about me. Pretending it's about my movies, my career, my values. But it's not, is it? It's about you, about proving something. About showing the world how intellectual and righteous you are by tearing someone else down." Joy froze for half a second before letting out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, that's rich," she spat. the illiterate warlord psychoanalyzing me. I don't need you to tell me who I am, Jason. I know exactly who I am. A woman who calls out hypocrisy when she sees it. A woman who refuses to be charmed by some Hollywood hunk who thinks he's better than everyone else. Jason shook his head slowly, almost pityingly. Then why do you sound so desperate to convince yourself? He asked quietly. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Joy's face went crimson, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Oh, don't you dare, she hissed. Don't you sit there and act like you're some noble sage here to teach me about myself. You're just an actor, a lucky gym rat who stumbled into some undeserved fame. Jason finally sat back in his chair, crossing one massive leg over the other, utterly unruffled. Well, he said evenly, that undeserved fame seems to bother you more than it does me. The studio erupted, some clapping, some gasping, some too stunned to react at all. Joy's voice rose above the din. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you're so calm and collected. But underneath it all, you're just like every other man. Afraid of losing relevance. Afraid of becoming obsolete. Afraid of someone like me telling you that your time is up. Jason fixed her with the kind of look that could silence a raging sea. Joy, he said, quiet but clear. My time isn't up, but I can see you're running out of yours. That line cut through the room like a blade. Even Joy's co-host looked away uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their notes. For a moment, just a moment, Joy looked shaken, but she recovered quickly, slamming her cards down onto the table and leaning forward again, fire in her eyes. You want to play hardball, Jason? She sneered. Fine. Let's talk about your precious influence, violence, aggression, toxic masculinity. You've poisoned generations of boys with your macho nonsense. And now here you sit, smug and untouchable, acting like you've done the world a favor. Jason leaned in too, their faces just feet apart, his voice so soft it forced the entire room to lean in to hear. And yet, he said, here you sit, trying so hard to tear me down and still not tall enough to reach me. The audience gasped, then fell silent. Joy sat back slowly, her lips pressed tight, her hands trembling slightly. Jason remained where he was, calm, composed, unbothered. The tension was now so thick, it felt like a storm was about to break, and everyone watching knew this was only going to get worse before it got better. You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room. Jason Momoa's quiet retort had left Joy Behar visibly shaken, but only for a second. Then the storm returned, fiercer than before. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a battle for dignity. And Joy wasn't going to let Jason walk away with the upper hand, even if it meant burning the whole set down around them. Joy Behar adjusted her glasses, her jaw tight, her lips pressed into a hard line as she leaned forward over the table, closing the gap between her and Jason. Oh, you think you're so clever, don't you? She began, her voice low and venomous now, dropping the usual quippy sarcasm for something much darker. You think that chill Islander act still works? That it still charms people? Jason didn't flinch. He simply straightened his vest and replied evenly. Joy, I don't have to charm anyone. You're doing a fine job of making yourself look small all by yourself. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. The co-hosts stared down at their notes or avoided looking at either of them altogether. Joy's cheeks flushed crimson, but she pressed on louder now, determined not to lose control again. You know what I think? She shot back, her voice rising. I think you're scared. Scared that the world's finally catching up to you, that people are realizing you're nothing but a relic of a primitive era that should have ended decades ago. Jason's eyes narrowed just slightly, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. You keep calling me a relic, Joy, he said slowly. But what does that make you, sitting here trying to tear down someone who's built more in his lifetime than you've done in your career? The audience erupted into another wave of gasps and whispers. Joy's hands slammed down onto the table with a sharp crack. That's rich, she barked. Coming from a man who built his entire career playing the same damn character over and over. The silent, brooding brute who solves every problem with his fists or his weapons. You glorified violence and called it entertainment. Jason nodded once, a humorless smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're right about one thing, he said evenly. I've played a lot of flawed men, violent men, but if you'd actually watched any of those movies past the trailer, you'd see they're about protecting what matters. You're accusing me of glorifying what I've spent my career fighting against. Weakness of spirit. For the first time, Joy faltered just for a breath, but she recovered and leaned in closer, her voice dropping into a hiss. Don't you dare lecture me about spirit, she spat. Your films are just excuses for insecure men to feel tough. You're nothing more than a mascot for the worst kind of masculinity. And here you are still playing the same role in real life because you don't know how to be anything else. Jason's eyes flashed with something cold and hard, a storm brewing behind them, but he still didn't raise his voice. You seem awfully sure of who I am, he said softly. It's a shame you haven't spent half as much time figuring out who you are. That landed like a hammer. Even Joy's co-hosts stiffened in their chairs, but Joy only got louder, refusing to give him an inch. Oh, please, she scoffed, throwing her hands up. I know exactly who I am. I've spent my life standing up to bullies like you, men who think they can silence women with a glare and a muscle flex. I've been calling out your type since before you even knew how to say action. Jason's gaze didn't waver. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so the entire room had to lean in just to catch the words. And yet, he murmured, here you are, still yelling, still trying to prove something, still mistaking noise for strength. Joy froze, momentarily robbed of speech. The audience's murmurs grew louder, the tension now electric. Joy's hand shook slightly as she grabbed another card from the stack on the table, trying to regain control. All right, she snapped. Let's talk about your so-called masterpieces, shall we? Conan, a mindless barbarian who kills to get his way. Game of Thrones, a rapist warlord who somehow gets painted as a romantic lead. Aquaman, a movie about a guy who punches his way to the throne. That's your legacy, Jason. Violence, pain, dominance, and somehow you're proud of it. Jason's jaw flexed once, his massive hands folding together on the table. He stared at her for a long moment before answering. My legacy, he said finally, his voice low and measured, is bringing people together even when it's loud, even when people like you can't handle the energy. I don't make movies for critics. I make them for the people who want to escape, the dreamers, the ones who want to feel powerful. You don't have to like it, but you don't get to rewrite it either. Joy sneered, her voice dripping with derision. Oh, please, she said, almost shouting now. You're just another meathead clinging to relevance because you're too afraid to face the fact that the world has moved on without you. You should have retired years ago. You should have left before you embarrassed yourself. For the first time, Jason stood up slowly, deliberately, his full 6'4" height and presence filling the studio. The audience gasped and fell silent. He leaned forward just slightly, his eyes locked on Joy's, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. Joy, he said evenly, I've never needed to chase relevance, and I don't need your permission to keep doing what I love. But you might want to ask yourself what happens when the cameras stop rolling and there's nobody left to clap for you. Joy's face blanched, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly it looked painful. For a long moment, the two just stared at each other, the air between them thick with unspoken words. And then Jason straightened, adjusted his necklace, and calmly sat back down, never breaking eye contact. The entire studio felt like it was holding its breath, and everyone knew the final act of this confrontation was about to begin. No one in the studio moved. Every eye was fixed on Jason Momoa and Joy Behar as the final round of their clash loomed. The air was heavy, not with noise, but with the quiet certainty that something irreversible was about to happen. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was the kind of moment that defines careers and leaves reputations in ruins. Joy broke the silence first. Her voice cracked slightly as she forced a laugh. Oh, what's the matter, Jason? Running out of cool little lines? Or are you just realizing that the world doesn't revolve around you anymore? Jason didn't even flinch. He simply rose to his feet again, slowly removing his microphone. You know, he said calmly, When I walked in here today, I thought I was sitting down with professionals. I thought we'd talk about my work, my passion, maybe even have a little fun. But instead, you've turned this into a spectacle. Joy shot back, her voice shrill now. You don't get to play the victim here, Jason. Not after everything you've done, the movies you've made, the messages you've sent. You don't get to act like you're above criticism. Jason held her gaze, his expression unreadable. Criticism is fine, he replied, his voice still steady. What you've done here isn't criticism, it's bitterness, and I don't have to stand here and soak up another second of it. Joy started to respond, but Jason cut her off, his words quiet but absolute. You invited me here as a guest, and you treated me like an enemy, so I'll save you the trouble of kicking me out. With that, he set the microphone down on the table with deliberate care. Good luck with your show, he added. But if you're wondering why people stop coming back, you might want to replay this episode and take a good hard look. The studio went silent as Jason walked off the set, leaving Joy frozen in her chair, her face pale with a mix of rage and humiliation. As the door closed behind him, the audience erupted, some in applause, some in shocked whispers, but everyone knowing they had just witnessed a moment that would be talked about for years. And that's how Jason Momoa walked out of The View with his dignity intact and left Joy Behar to reckon with the consequences of her own bitterness. What do you think? Did Jason go too far, or was he justified in walking out? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Starkind Stories for more unforgettable moments from Hollywood and beyond. Until next time, stay curious and stay classy.